Hey, hello everybody. It is about 5 or 6 minutes until we get started here. And I've got our first guest, Margaret Rogers, with us. Margaret, hello.
Hello.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here. So, guys, in the question section, those of you signing in the questions or the chat section, why don't you say hello? If you've got any questions, I'm going to be trying to monitor that as we go. Hey, Ted Stark, there you are again, buddy. You're saying hello. Thank you so much for being here. Let me know where you guys are from. Say hello, and let me know where you are from. Again, I'm going to try to get this. Brian, you say, is the entire series going to be on this connection? It is. You don't have to go in or out of it, just one sign in, and you can come in. And if you leave because your family wants you, you can sign back on. That's no problem. Hey, Jeff Wedge, let's make it happen. Leaders, right on, buddy. I appreciate it. Jeff, did you see I did a webinar on Thursday on my new ebook, Distribution is Dead as We Know It, and your post on what pilots do. Would you type that in again, Jeff? Because I used that, your LinkedIn picture, and I tied that into my webinar. So thank you. Appreciate it. Hey, Jim, Kenzel, thank you so much for being here, buddy, and thanks for your leadership in all of this. Hey, there's John, you say, from Toronto. Thank you so much. Jeff Wedge from California. Howie from Wisconsin. Brad, you're in Chicago Metro. Good to see you, Brad. I'm in Barrington. Yeah, just outside, you know, and John and Larry from Chicago as well. Here's Cam. Cam is from the company Wrench in Ohio. Good to see you, buddy. Thank you. Our Mark Andre from Canada. Thank you. Yeah, here's, guys, this is what Jeff Wedge posted, talking about what we have to do in these times to secure our core of the business. Listen to this quote he said. Pilots are taught what to do when there's a fire and smoke in the cockpit. And the first thing they're supposed to do is put the damn fire out, right? Keep the plane flying. Don't worry about anything else. And, you know, that's part of what we got to do in this time. So, Brent, you're from Minneapolis. Thank you. We got about 2 or 3 minutes till we start. First, fly the plane right on. James Weaver from East Vale. Oh my gosh, ready, Margaret? Here we go. Don't ever get over 50. Well, get over 50, but
I'm not far.
yeah. So David from Northwest Indiana, thanks for being here, Paul. Hey, Paul Kennedy, man, you thank you so much, man, for your support, buddy. Thanks for being here. Mark from Chicago, Mark Andre from Montreal. There's some great hockey players with that name, Mark Andre. Gary Ritchie from Minnesota, Jack. Let's see, from Houston. Hey, we're thinking about you guys in Houston, not only from this pandemic, but with the price of oil, man. Houston's going to take some hits, right? Margaret, I see you shaking your head. Yeah, so Jamie's from Pittsburgh. Dick, hey, Dirk. It's Dick Stewart. Thank you, Dick, for being here. David, you're saying hello to me. Thank you for being here, and a bunch more are coming in. So, Margaret, we got a great team, a great group of people that are really anxious for this. How are you doing today, Margaret?
I'm doing well. You know, Sunday straight from the DC metro area, you know, yeah. In my den.
Yeah, that has become your workspace and
it
all
has become my impromptu workspace.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Like a lot of us, right? So David says, greetings from New Jersey. Greetings, David. Yeah, thank you. So, Margaret, we do have just about a minute till we officially kick this off, and people are still coming in here. Really appreciate you guys joining us. You know, these are unique times, aren't they?
They really are.
Yeah, just unique. You know, I was saying, Margaret, the word unprecedented and new normal almost seem hollow to me now.
I mean, there's so much going on, and it's day by day. It's so dynamic. It just, people are trying to figure it out.
Yeah, without question. And that's what we're here to do too, right? Is just come together as a community and try to figure it out together, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, without question. All right, so it is 2:30 Central Time, guys. We are here to get the show on the road. those of you joining us, if you have questions, put them in the question. I'm going to try to be popping in and out of those to answer any type of questions that do come up. Any other thoughts? I'd love to hear from you as well. Margaret and the rest of you, I got to tell you something. Now, this is our second week in a row that we are having this conversation leading during the coronavirus pandemic. And, you know, as I said last week, this was a kernel of an idea last Friday at 10 a.m. And we just put out some feelers, and all of a sudden it came together in less than 48 hours for our program last Sunday. And got a lot of great feedback. And I think, I think the guests like you, Margaret, helped a lot of people. In fact, I know it did. And feeling what's going on in our country and in our businesses, in our families, I sensed towards the end of this week, tiredness. I sensed people needed a break, right? And this mental fatigue, I believe, really took an impact. I know I put up a video yesterday and shared that I was tired, that I was going to unplug last night. And the reason I tell you that is I almost didn't do this today. I actually waited until about 2 o'clock on Friday to pull the trigger. Dots were connected. I said, let's do it. But I sensed this mental fatigue. And but all that said, we have 75% more registrants today than we did last week. So while I think we have this mental fatigue, I think we also still need to come together. And we want community, I think. And if I can, I want to be hugged personally, right? I want to be hugged, and I need ideas. And so I think that's what we're all doing here. So Margaret, you're number one today. So thank you for being here.
Well, thanks for having me. I understand what you mean by mental fatigue. So, you know, it had only been a week since our company had gone to work from home. And at the end of the week, I too felt really tired. It felt like we had been doing this for months.
Without question. So Margaret, let's jump into it if you don't mind. And I'm going to just real quick show my screen here just for a second, and then we'll come back away from this. But everybody, let me introduce you to our first guest today, Margaret Rogers. Margaret is the VP of Customer Experience for an amazing consulting organization, Pariveda, based in Dallas. Is that right, Margaret?
It is based in Dallas.
Yeah, based in Dallas. And I was introduced to you by an amazing individual on your team, your Chief Operating Officer by the name of Carrie Stover. And guys, I got to tell you something. There are a lot of consulting firms out there. I've never met one, including mine, like Pariveda. Pariveda is a digital service organization that helps individuals and organizations achieve their full potential. What I'm about to say is not just words. This organization works to grow people. There's a whole story there, Margaret. Maybe you'll touch on that for me. But truly, they work to grow people. The story of how the company was founded is, to me, absolutely amazing. Margaret herself is a strategic and creative advisor who's focused on developing long-term digital plans, identifying market opportunities, and helping maximize returns on technology investment. And Margaret, I think, do you have, as we were planning, do you have your dinner on the stove for your family getting ready? Did you say something like that?
Instapots are my new friend.
So, Margaret, we're going to talk about how we foster resiliency in this time of crisis. But would you mind just sharing, give the short version of your commitment as an organization to grow people? Would you mind?
Yeah, no problem. So, you know, Pariveda was founded on the concept that if we focus on people first, that the right outcomes will come from that. And
Yeah.
that investment really means understanding people's needs and creating the right environment such that things like collaboration, transparency, genuineness are encouraged as behaviors, and that allows for risk-taking, daring, and innovation, right? So we really lean into that as an organization. You know, I'll talk a little bit about culture later and the strength that it can lift somebody through these times of interesting times. But it's something we're really proud of.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I'm inspired by what you guys do, and even that you guys started the company, the founders, saying that we're going to build a company for 100 years and forever. And I just think it's great. Okay, but we're here to talk about resiliency. Okay, I could. So, Margaret, during a crisis, what behaviors have you seen are often exhibited by companies, if you don't mind?
Yeah, so you know, when people think about crisis, they probably think about the zombie apocalypse movies, right? Where people are running around in a frenzy. And actually, more often than not, people actually freeze, right? Before they're able to start reacting. We kind of tap into the lizard brain, and that fight or flight mode takes a hold. And basically, what's happening is the brain is trying to process through what you know so you can formulate a plan for survival. And in our modern times, emotionally stressful events can trigger this, such as a pandemic or public speaking or getting on a plane. So companies led by the collective are very much the same way, often a little slower to react because the stakes are higher and there are more variables to process. And so in this times, as we mentioned before, you know, COVID-19 is changing day by day and all the variables are changing all the time. And so the decisions feel harder in this time.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And you mentioned that they're slower to react. Companies are slower to react. How do you feel about that reality in this time, in this unique, unprecedented time? That
It's definitely a balance because while decisions are harder, long-term inaction can be just as dangerous as rash decision making, right? So in either case, you can create increased anxiety, like because people are trying to figure out how worse are things likely to get and how long is this going to last. But the growing pressure in leadership to do something often produces these uncoordinated moves, right, that overcompensate or underachieve and end up being ineffective. And so you see these organizations that are essentially go through the forming, storming, norming, and they're trying to go as quickly as possible to perform and get through the crisis. But it can be really difficult because the length of those stages can vary depending on the circumstances. So teams that really have created this trust and common understanding are more likely to execute better in a kind of environment such as this, in uncertainty and volatility, whereas leaders that haven't been able to achieve this with their team are going to struggle more with that
yeah,
kind of, yeah.
yeah, no doubt. So let's say whatever place we're in, right? We've been able to create that trust, or we have not. All right, we're where we're at. Um, I really am struck by what you said about the uncoordinated moves, right?
Mhm.
And how that can potentially hurt or will hurt the potential outcome. If you were to coach us, Margaret, in terms of just that thought, right, that we want to create coordinated moves
Mhm.
versus a hodgepodge, reacting to every. Do you have any thoughts and tips and recommendations for us there?
For sure. So a lot of things come down to a balance of being sharp and swift with your focus, right? You can't solve every single problem. There's a triage, an understanding of your business, and as well as your supply chain and your environment that leaders really have to analyze pretty quickly in order to create common goals. Right, so sharp focus into those goals is really critical. The second piece is having really strong communications, and the communications often people think about internal communications, but this goes with things like your partners, your vendors, your customers are really just as important. We also think about reliable execution because whatever goals you have, you've got to be able to do that well. And in that communication process, it's critical to have clarity on accountabilities and what does success look like as we are kind of converging to these goals. And then
Yeah.
frequently remeasuring and reassessing the environment, right? Because the variables are always changing.
Yeah, without question. And that sharp focus into the goals. That's sharp focus into the goals. Um, can you share with us, how we as leaders should be driving that sharp focus? I know you mentioned communication, but how should we be driving that sharp focus throughout a distributed organization today?
Yeah, so, from the leadership side, there is the analysis of the financial health, your supply chain, your partners, and your employees, and making sure you're able to model both short-term and long-term scenarios so that you can quickly prioritize your efforts. In creating those new goals, you're probably creating new roles and new outcomes. And what's important here is that effective organizations are better when they can say no, and that means deprioritizing initiatives as well as reprioritizing other ones, because what you need to do is create space for people to be able to concentrate on those new efforts in order to achieve business continuity.
Yeah, I love it. We've often heard, right, that it's important to say no, right? But I've never heard it say the way you just did. Probably everybody else on here has. I haven't. But the deprioritization of initiatives, just taking that mindset to the organization, I think is absolutely critical. Would you agree there?
Yeah, for sure. I think deprioritization, like I said, helps get rid of the messy desk, right? If you have a messy desk, you got to get rid of the things that you are not need to focus on. I'm not looking at your desk. You should see my
Or the
desk.
or the piles that I put on the floor for today. Okay, thank you.
That's right. So, I mean, and I think there is a mental piece that helps employees become more productive, right? By clearing that space. Creating space is really important so that they can drive towards the common goal and not be distracted by something else.
Yeah, love it. Hey, do you mind? I'm just going to look in here. Jim Penzel says the conversation brings to mind uncertainty within the team and ensuring transparency and constant communication. Margaret's emphasis on setting goals and focus is exactly what we seem to forget to do in crisis. That's a pretty good insight. It's what we forget to do, set goals and focus, what we seem to forget to do in crisis. Any thoughts on that comment?
For sure. Like when I talk about strong communications, I think
Yeah.
about clarity, frequency, and genuineness, especially in times like this, because there is a human component to this that we can't forget. That people are experiencing heightened emotional risk. And so, in a time when there's an information overload that is abundant and without a lot of controls, it's hard to figure out what's real and what's not.
Yeah.
Even naturally, you're going to hear things through the grapevine. So, as leaders, it's important to be able to express in your own words so that you create the transparency that is critical to survival. And I think one of the things, Brene Brown talks about vulnerability, and I think this is a really critical time for leaders to be able to say, hey, we don't have all the answers, but here's what we do know. And that is a powerful tool to build up trust and enable people to action.
I love it. I don't know his name, but Margaret, did you see in the last day, it's up online, the message of the CEO of Marriott Corporation to his employees?
They just did layoffs, right? I didn't see
Um,
the
yeah.
message.
So what I will suggest to everybody on here, when we're done, go and Google the CEO of Marriott and his message to his employees, and it's so authentic. He showed that vulnerability. He was actually welling up, towards the end as he's delivering the message that needs to be delivered. And this authenticity, and I know human connection is something that you think about a lot, and I think he was very effective in doing that. So can you talk to me about the need for this human connection and the leader's responsibility, even in the way we communicate, to ensure that human connection during these times?
So when we think about human connection, one of them is one of the clearest ways when we focus internally is leaders need to be able to reach out and first ask, how are you doing? That's really
Okay.
critical. It's something we've done within our organization as we've moved to remote work from home status.
Yeah.
And we as leaders are charged with making sure the well-being of our employees. And so that means one-on-ones. You might need to create them if you don't have them already. It means more frequent checkpoints from a team level, maybe once or twice a day. It means rapidly pushing out key training points for mentors or supervisors on how to even monitor their teams and some of the words that might be helpful. And also even enabling passive and active methods of communications. So chats, Zooms, surveys, sentiments, to really keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on.
I love it. So I don't know if this is a good question, but if I'm sitting there saying, guys, I got to reach out, one or two times, I don't have to, right? This is, as a leader, I want to do this. I don't know if anybody on here might be thinking, okay, but what do I ask? What does that conversation look like? And you start by asking, how are you doing? Is that the start of these conversations? And I would just love any other thoughts, to make sure that I'm doing that effectively when I reach out.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's a beautiful thing, right? When somebody first calls you up out of the blue and says, "Hey, I just wanted to check in on you. How are you doing?
Yeah.
How are you feeling?" Right? Understanding how they're feeling. How is your home? How's your family? What are you worried about? What
Cool.
can I do to help you? Right? And so understanding those things are so individualistic that it's important to be able to have those touch points and really listen, because listening will be a key point in an employee or an individual feeling like they've been heard.
Yeah. Margaret, I appreciate this. And I won't share who, obviously, but I was recently talking to a millennial who is working from home, obviously, living alone in an apartment. And this individual actually got a call from their boss, asked, how are you doing? And I got to tell you, it wasn't well received. It wasn't. And I think maybe because it was almost like a checklist rather than the authenticity of what you suggest is here. So I think that authenticity and really wanting to understand and is absolutely critical.
I agree with that 100%. So, especially now that we're doing, for folks that can work remotely and have the privilege of being able to do so, we're on laptops. And so there's nothing worse than being on a video Zoom and first not being on camera to be able to create that human connection, and then to be typing on your email as somebody's trying to tell you something, right? All of a sudden, you just kind of depleted any sort of genuineness to the conversation. And so being engaged, being present is very critical in that.
Yeah, love it. Thank you. I have a question here, and any recommendations from Margaret? How best to keep skeptical employees on message? Skeptical employees on message. That's all I've got there. Does it generate any thoughts for you?
So unpacking that one, I think what they're asking is, you've got a skeptical employee or a leader, and they're skeptical about the plan or the focus.
Yep.
And
Yes.
I think this is where we talked a little bit about culture, right? Culture plays a little bit of a part in this, but making sure that the employee understands the impacts of their actions and their words on others, and how it may or what those outcomes might be, how it may be damaging in an unnecessary way. And it doesn't take a lot. And for depending on why they're skeptical, there could be an acknowledgement like, "Hey, I understand. I understand." So even being able to acknowledge that they're skeptical and why they're skeptical, and you can see why, that empathy will go a long way.
Yeah, well said. The last session today, I saved for myself, and I'm going to talk about some mindsets and principles to maybe bring to the sales organization. And I really think maybe the greater organization. But to your point about that skeptical, I'm going to talk about mindsets. And I think one of those mindsets that we want to have an open dialogue and conversation with our team is that this is a time for them to lead, right? And that every single action that they take is going to be watched by their family, by the other employees in the organization. And I think just simply having that conversation tied to what you're saying too could be part of our messaging, the poor word, messaging with that skeptical employee.
Yeah, I really love that. And, you know, you don't want to be obfuscating anything, and you don't want to be so overly rose-colored glasses that you set unrealistic expectations. But there is a drive and a purpose and a hope. You know, there's that cocktail mixture in that mindset that really can drive an organization forward if everybody has a touch of that, right?
Yeah, love it. Thanks. So I will one more time remind everybody, go and look for the Marriott CEO and Paul Kennedy. Thank you. Mentioned that his name is Arnie Sorensen. So there it is, and he gave me the link. I put it in the chat. I don't know if y'all can see it, but we'll send it out afterwards. So so we've talked about you know, our role right now. You know, some of the roles that you've talked about here. Are there any other things in your mind, Margaret, that can seriously get in the way and hinder? I know we've talked about some of them, but that can hinder our ability to drive the resiliency and the alignment and the commitment that's needed during these tough times?
Yeah, I think when we lose sight of what we're trying to do and create mutual benefit, I think when we become too insular in ourselves, and we don't think about the broader ecosystem of partnership, as companies, if we're able to create mutual benefits for everybody,
Yep.
that is the best case scenario. And I also love, I know we talked about this, but I can't emphasize this enough. You know, Peter Drucker says, culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yep.
And I truly believe that, because it is your culture. And if you have a culture that you don't think is quite as strong, then this is the time where you can actually start to really plant the seeds for one. And when we think about moving forward beyond this, you know, what happens after a crisis, it shouldn't go back to normal or what your previous normal was. It should be reflecting on the things that were super successful and being able to weave that into your culture so that there's creative courage, there is truth and transparency, and then it helps you build resiliency.
I love it. Thank you. So two things I want to come to. So one, something that came through loud and clear to me last week is this is our moment in time to think about the other side when we come out of the other side, right? And how we're going to come out of this stronger. And one of the things that I hear you saying is, you know, it would be a great time as a leader to stop, pause, and think about our culture as it is today and what we would love that culture to be in the future, right? And use this crisis as a moment to proactively and strategically begin making those moves that are needed to close that gap.
Mm-hmm.
You agree?
This is a perfect opportunity to do something like that. And large, impactful events like this, it is an opportunity to reset and rethink. And you know, when we talked about uncoordinated actions before, you know,
Yeah,
this is, if things are too chaotic, you can't see the forest through the trees, right? You cannot see those opportunities. And to your point, this is a perfect opportunity to be able to start leaning in and planting the seeds so that when you come out on the other side, you are in a better place and that you started the path to that culture that you need and will help you in the next crisis.
I agree, 100%. Thank you. And then you mentioned at least 2 or 3 times the term creative courage. I love that. I don't even know what it means yet, but I love it. All right. So tell me about creative courage, please.
So, creative courage is just encouraging individuals and teams to be able to take risks and calculated risks, right? Not any risk, right?
Yeah.
But calculated risks. And no matter the outcome, whether it's a failure or not, that you recognize that they are going to be learning something, that your organization is going to be learning something, and through those even failures, the organization is moving forward. So creative confidence is creating the environment to allow people to actually do that and make those investments. And sometimes the most amazing innovations come from that.
Yeah, without question. Thank you so much. So we're running up on, I've got about 5 minutes until Jeannie's going to be on. You know, put a bow on this. Margaret, any thoughts about what happens after the crisis passes? and investing in future resilience and the like?
Right. So we talked about taking the things that you learn. It's really important to reflect regularly during the crisis and after the crisis about things that are working well and things that should be codified for long-term usage, and things that probably need to go into a business continuity plan if you don't already have one. And then looking at your people, process, and your tools or technology and your entire environment, such that you can foster stronger relationships and stronger outcomes, both with your employees, but also, again, with your suppliers and your customers. This is crisis brings opportunity, and every organization has that opportunity.
Fantastic. Thank you. Margaret, this has just been absolutely amazing. I appreciate it. You know, if you had, based on the things we've talked about, the things you are thinking about personally, the things that Pariveda are thinking about right now, if you had one closing thought for our attendees today, what would that be?
Well, when I think about Pariveda and our culture of being so human-centered, you know, at the end of the day, it is the people that will bring us to the other side. And so we as leaders and we as businesses cannot forget that people are the machine that's behind everything. And so investing in our people, investing in the empathy, make sure that we're creating clear direction and understanding. Those human touch points are so natural, and yet for some reason, to somebody's point before, we sometimes forget about them. So really lean into that and push it into the forefront.
Yeah, appreciate it. Wonderful. Thank you. You know, in the end, right? In the end, yeah, we're thinking about the business. Yeah, we're thinking about society. Yeah, we're thinking about the country. Yeah, we're thinking about the industry and the market and our suppliers and our customers. But in the end, it's about humanity, isn't it? It's about the individuals and the like.
It sure is. It sure is.
Yeah,
They all have families and they're people, right?
without question. Margaret, this has been absolutely amazing. Thank you so very, very much. Hey, can I ask everybody online, just if you don't mind, in the questions, Kevin just typed in there, good stuff. Thank you so much, Margaret. And as I'm starting to make the transition, if anybody wants to say thank you to Margaret and what you guys are thinking, you know, one word to describe, you know, what you're feeling about the time we just spent with Margaret, put it in and I'll share with it. And look at this, Margaret. Jeannie is so excited. She came in to join us. So I'm going to switch over to Jeannie, if that's all right, Margaret. All right.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you
And
for
Margaret,
having me, by the way.
are you kidding me? Thank you so very much. We're honored. And guys, we learned a ton from you. Thank you so very, very much. And hey, here you go. Before you go, well done. Thank you. Thank you. Feeling hopeful right now. Oh my gosh, right? Thank you, Margaret. Thank you. Thank you. People in all inspiring, very good. Thank you very much. Great insight. Love thy neighbor, inspirational. I could go on. It's all in there. Margaret, you impacted people and helped us all from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so very, very much.
Well, thank you. It's really been a privilege. Honor's mine.
All right. And don't forget the food's on the stove, all right?
It's in the Instapot. I highly recommend it.
I gotta learn what an Instapot is. All right. We'll see you.